price doesn't change, the price that you would pay. Amazon influencer program sounds so fancy, but anyways, so I have finally read The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. This book came out 4 years ago, and I bought it back then, but I never got to it. I don't know. But I watched the movie recently. Well, semi-recently. I actually watched it on an airplane. And I was so confused. Come to find out, they've cut out a lot of scenes on the airplane, so I did not understand it at all. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to read the book finally. And now I have to rewatch the movie on Netflix probably because, yeah, I don't know, I feel like I've been cheated because, yeah. I also watched Emily, no, not Emily in Paris, completely wrong movie, no, Love, Rosie. The reason why I confused the two is because Lily Collins is the main character in both of those. Love, Rosie, and they also cut out a lot of scenes from the movie which I've watched previously on the airplane. So that's how I knew that they cut out some scenes, and then I watched it. I think I watched a clip on YouTube and I realized this scene wasn't there. Yeah, anyways. So the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes talks about young President Snow. In this story, he is the main character, but it only talks about like a relatively short period when he was 17, 18, that age. It doesn't tell you how he came into power exactly. It sort of foreshadows it, but it doesn't tell you exactly. Also, when I was sick, I watched all of the previous Hunger Game movies, and I've read the books a long time ago. This meme, this quote still gets me that was said by President Snow. They're holding hands. I want them dead. The quote, I love that quote. It's so unhinged. So, in this book, we kind of see his formative years, formative period, and his character, kind of what allowed him to essentially rise to power and become the tyrant that we knew in the Hunger Games. Also, in this book, it tells you the origin of the Hanging Tree song. And I really like the parallels between the two stories because essentially Katniss, the main character in Hunger Games, chose this song to be like the song of the rebellion, which was actually a song made by his President Snow's ex-girlfriend that, yeah, I cannot go into details like what happened if you haven't watched the movie or show, but I like that, I'm not gonna lie. Other than that, I don't know, like maybe I've expected more from this story. I thought we would see him actually using the poison on a lot of his enemies, like we know from the Hunger Games trilogy. You know, that's why he had like blisters in his mouth, because he would build tolerance for poisons. I would actually really like to see that, but we only saw one example in the story. I gave it like 4 stars. I don't know, I feel like the story was too short because it focused too much on the Hunger Games that were happening at the time, which is fine, and then what happened afterwards, but I feel like it was still missing something. I would still prefer to have maybe the story like a bit longer, but anyways. Okay, so also on the airplane, I've watched again Me Before You, which originally was a book by Jojo Moyes, and I really, really liked the movie and the book. Do I fully agree with what happened in it towards the end? No. But if you're not familiar, it talks about a woman that gets hired to be a caretaker of a young man that became disabled after an accident. And it has this concept of like, you live your life a certain way, and then all of a sudden you meet somebody and they completely change the trajectory of your life, and all of a sudden you want more from life and you're working harder and you're getting more out of your comfort zone. So they only made the first book into a movie. I liked it. There's also a second and third book which talks about what happened afterwards. So the first book is called Me Before You. The second book is called After You. And I've read the first book years ago with a friend of mine, and we both liked the first book, and she also continued with the series. I didn't. I was so mad that I refused to continue the story, even though I actually bought the second book already before I finished the first book. But I was so mad. I was just saying, no, like there's no way I'm going to continue the story. But I still had the book, so I decided to finally read it. I'm currently on page 140 out of 300 something pages, and I still think that the series should have been a standalone. I keep reading the story because I like the main character. Lou, I think that's her name. That's why I keep reading, but I hate the tropes that are in this book. I cannot tell you without spoiling. You know what? Okay, here's a timestamp that you can skip to if you absolutely do not want to be spoiled, okay? Even if you have read the first book or watched the first movie, again, like you can skip ahead. Right? So, in the second book, first of all, we're dealing with grief, right? But also it has this trope that I don't like, which is a secret child popping out of nowhere. I do not like this trope at all, at all. It bothers me. First of all, I feel like it was only done to continue the series. I feel like it didn't need to be added, and I also feel like it kind of spoils the first book in a way, because now we get to learn about the past of Will, right? And knowing that he was an a-hole, and now you have this child that's like bothering Lou. I don't like it. I really don't like it. I think the first story, it made sense, even though I did not agree with the ending. But this, it bothers me, and I honestly don't know if I should continue with the book or not. Essentially, when I first realized what is going on, I wanted to put it down, but now I'm like, I've read 1/3 already, so should I continue? Should I just read a different book instead? I don't know, but Izawa. And I really liked the story. It talks about this woman living in Tokyo, just trying to live her own life, form relationships, get closer to family. It's very laid back story. There's one thing that made me mad, and that's how could I? Okay, this is like again like a mild spoiler, but it happens very very early on in the book. That she learns that her boyfriend of 2 years, has been cheating on her. Well, technically, he was cheating with her on his fiancée. His actual relationship was 4 years, and he was cheating with her for 2 years, but she didn't know. She had no idea. She thought they're in a monogamous relationship, and she blames herself for it so much. Excuse me, why? Why was this put in the book? It made me so mad. I don't like when characters are like that. Like, let's blame the actual culprit, which was the man in the story. Why would she blame herself? That made me so mad. But that's what starts her story. I think she even resigns from her work because her, now ex-boyfriend, who was a lying, manipulative, cheating piece of shit, works there as well, and she cannot stand it, so she pretty much loses her job too, and she has a hard time finding a different job, which is how she arrives to the Morisaki bookshop, which is owned by her uncle, and she starts helping out there. Except for the outrageous beginning. It's actually a nice story. Well, there's one more character that kind of made me slightly mad, but other than that, it is heartwarming. It is a heartwarming story still, about friendship, family, daily life, and I know that the second book comes out soon, or it already came out already. The original book came out years ago in Japan, but now it's being translated to English. Okay, I would recommend it if you like these sort of laid back stories. Why not? Alright, then I'm currently reading The Age of Magical Overthinking, Notes on Modern Irrationality by Amanda Montell, and I already read a book by her 2 years ago, I want to say, I don't know, on cults, and I really enjoyed that book. That book talks about the psychology of cults, what makes somebody join a cult. It talks about some of the most famous cults, and it's a really great book. So that's why I picked this up as well. It's a non-fiction. This book is a little bit different. It's a bunch of essays talking about today's society, today's trends, social media, and just the overall psychology of today's society. I'm only halfway through it, at 50%, but I really, really like it, I'm not gonna lie, to the point that I feel like I should make a separate video just talking about that book, because some of the discussions I feel like are much needed. So for example, it talks about, okay, there's like a few things that I want to talk about, but maybe I should just make this a separate video. Anyways, my favorite theory, okay, is the sunken cost fallacy, and I already knew of this theory because I went to econ uni, and one of the first lessons was about sunken cost fallacy. But in this book, it talks quick econ lesson, okay? It will be interesting, don't worry. You're not gonna fall asleep, or maybe you should. This is an ASMR video, but I'll give you an example, and this is the exact example that was given to me years ago. You buy a ticket for a bus to go to a different city. After you buy the ticket, which is non-refundable, all of a sudden a friend pulls up and asks you if you would like a lift to the different city. But you already bought the ticket. What do? Would you A, go with the bus because you already paid for the ticket, or B, take the ride with a friend and you can be more comfortable, you can catch up perhaps? Most people would choose the bus because they already bought the ticket, right? But the ticket price are actually sunken costs, meaning no matter what you do in this situation, you cannot get that money back. So now it's up to you to decide if you want to be more comfortable with a friend or be uncomfortable in the bus packed with a lot of people. Regardless, the costs of the ticket, that sunken cost, you cannot get it back either way. If you're low-key confused, I'll give you the example that was used in the book. You are in a bad relationship for 2 years, and now you're thinking, okay, what should I do? Should I stay or should I leave? A lot of people decide to stay, to be in this toxic relationship, because they've already invested so much time, they've already invested so much effort. But guess what? The time and effort, that's sunken cost. You cannot get it back. Either way, no matter which option you choose. So either A, you're going to leave and you will try to be happy, or B, you're going to stay in the relationship because you've already spent, 2 years in this relationship. But guess what happens within another 2 years, or 4, or 6? So sunken costs should not be a reason for you to make a decision. Instead, you should ask yourself, does this relationship have a future? Can I be happy? Is this person going to change? Usually the answer is no, right? But making a decision upon sunken costs will only lead you to more bad decisions, basically, right? So this theory opened my eyes years ago. There are different factors you should take into account, not sunken costs. Most people do not think like that. They think, oh, I've already spent so much time, so much effort, and they don't really realize that they're going to end up spending more time and more effort until they just can't anymore. So that's a sunken cost fallacy. It's used in this book. And again, I feel like it kind of changed how I see the world. I remember when I first heard this theory, I remember thinking that's illogical. I already bought the ticket, I might as well use it. See, like, humans naturally want to think like that. And then it started to make sense to me after a while. Anyways, it also talks about survivorship bias. Another really interesting theory, which is you only see survivors. So for example, on social media, success is highlighted and you don't see any failure pretty much. I'll give you an example that's very close to my heart. So you want to start an ASMR channel and you keep seeing all of these successful ASMR artists. So you start and all of a sudden you realize, wow, this is actually really difficult. Nobody really told me it would be this difficult. The first milestone is 1,000 subscribers, and after that you can get monetized. There are like more requirements, but let's not get into that now. 1,000 subscribers. There's only 10% of channels on YouTube that are monetized. 10%. So if you reach 1,000 subscribers, congratulations, you're already in the top 10%, but you don't see the other 90% of people. Why? Because YouTube, the algorithm, will not show you that. Instead, they will recommend you mostly channels with hundreds of thousands of subscribers. That's 1%, but that's the only thing you are seeing, and you don't realize that you're looking at the top 1%. Same with the social media. I feel like on Instagram it's easier. It has been talked about, like nobody wants to share their bad moments. Even I do not do that on this channel. On Patreon I actually open up a little bit more and I talk about some negative things, but nobody really wants to listen to that. We already have enough negativity in our lives. Anyways, I could talk about this for a very long time. Unfortunately, I'm slightly running out of time. But this book also talks about, for example, the manifestation gurus. If you have noticed in recent years, they're pretty much everywhere. And even the term like, oh, I've manifested this, became like popular mainstream language. And actually I can just apply the theory I talked about, because you see all these manifestation gurus. Oh, I've manifested this, I really wanted this, or I was living in poverty and then I've manifested all of this wealth. Well, that's great. What about the other 90% of people that manifested this, that also worked hard and really wanted this, that failed? You don't see that. And then I see things like, well, if it didn't work out for you, if you didn't get what you wanted, well, that means you just weren't ready to receive it. Or maybe you didn't have a positive mindset. Or maybe you just didn't want it enough. And whenever I see that, I always think, well, that's some bullshit. Anyways, this book is really interesting. I might just do a full video on it, honestly, because I'm only halfway through it and there's still a lot of things that I didn't talk about that are in this book, a lot of concepts. So this is the book that I would probably recommend the most out of today's video. Okay, so I'm going to end this video now. Wait, I also forgot to talk about the books I'm going to be reading next. Oh, I am thinking about reading manga. There's this one very famous manga called Nana, and it's a Japanese manga. And I like, the only thing I know is it's about a band, and there's a lot of Vivienne Westwood fashion in it. That's what I know of it, but I'm interested. I don't know if I'm exactly a manga type person. I can never really get into it. I have read some comics before, and I've tried reading manga. It's just, I feel like it's not exactly my thing. I also want to read Six of Crows. I have not read this series yet. I only read the original one, the Shadow and Bone series. And I have the books. I even have all of the spin-offs, and I've started watching the Netflix show recently, so now I feel like it would be a right time for me to finally pick up that book. I don't know, I'm just in the mood for some fantasy these days. I also want to continue the Oathbringer book, which is part of the Stormlight Archive series. I don't know why I forgot the name of it, but I actually stopped reading it because I was just not in the mood for fantasy, but now I am. Whenever summer is approaching, I silencio.